everyone. So today I'm going to share with you my test drive experiences on 7 vehicles that we looked at to replace our Subaru Outback Wilderness after it was totaled out due to an accident that was no fault of our own. Since we weren't planning on replacing the Outback this quickly, we really didn't know what was out there, so we tried to keep an open mind as we were looking at these different vehicles, but we did give ourselves some criteria. Criteria number 1 is that it needed to be under $40,000. It's mostly going to be a commuting vehicle with occasional off-roading and adventuring, so that was important to us, is to try to keep that expense down since we have our ZR2 for any hard off-core off-roading that we will be doing. Number 2 is it needed to be able to tow. Now we were planning on adding a hitch to our Outback Wilderness, and that one is capable of towing 3,500 pounds. We do tow occasional yard stuff and other things like our dirt bikes, and we would like to be able to do that with something other than the ZR2, so that was pretty much a priority for us as well. Number 3 is, of course, it had to fit all 3 of us comfortably should we take it on a longer trip. This Outback Wilderness was great because it had enough room for all of our gear and things for a short weekend trip. And number 4, it had to be kind of cooler and not just your typical soccer mom vehicle. So those are the criteria that we were using when we were looking at the used vehicles. So without further ado, we'll start with the experience of our first vehicle. The dealership I went to was a Ford Toyota dealership. Now there are a couple of those ones around Western Colorado, and so we decided we'd check those out first. Now, I wasn't finding any Toyotas that were in the price point that I was willing to pay. I'm not a giant fan of the RAV4s. So that left us to the Ford side, which had a few vehicles that I was interested in. So the first one I test drove was the Ford Maverick. And we test drove the XL base model of this vehicle. Now, I won't lie, I didn't like it. Dane thought it was fun, but kind of in a kind of cutesy, I'm gonna like driving this for about a month sort of way, and then it's kind of gonna get boring after that. I thought the interior just didn't do it for me. A lot of the materials that are used in it reminded me of a bathroom countertop. So needless to say, even though this one met the towing criteria, gas mileage, and fitting all of us and having room enough for a trip, it just wasn't the vehicle for me. And if I'm gonna want to replace my Outback Wilderness with something that's not a Subaru, that was not meeting the criteria. So sorry for anybody who loves their Ford Mavericks, it just wasn't for me. So the second vehicle we test drove was also a Ford, and that one was the Bronco Sport. Now what's interesting about these ones is that they actually had a few that had the tow package, and they were still new but used. They were vehicles that were used to transport people for oil changes back to work and things like that, so they had about 3,000, 4,000 miles on them, but they were still offering them as new with oil change, warranty, all the things. Wouldn't start until you purchased them. So that actually made it quite more affordable for some of the upper trims. I did enjoy going on the test drive in it, but it just didn't feel like the vehicle for me. They can only tow 2,000 pounds when they're equipped correctly, and that wasn't really what we wanted to do. We wanted something at least equivalent of the Outback. It did drive nice, it just wasn't for me. Now, since I was kind of feeling a little let down by the 2 Fords I drove, we decided to go switch it up a little bit, and we went and we test drove a used Jeep Gladiator Willys edition, or Willys, depending on how you want to say it. Now this one I thought was a kick in the pants. I will always love a Jeep Gladiator, but it felt like it might have been a little bit too much for what they were asking for it. It was a beautiful drive. It had the hard top. It did need, of course, the liner that goes in the top to kind of help with that reverberation. The problem is that the Outback Wilderness got a lot better mileage than the Jeep, so that was kind of a compromise. However, I did enjoy driving that vehicle, so it made the short list. For anybody who saw our last video, you know that I am a sucker for a Ram Rebel. At the same dealership with the Jeep, they had a used Ram Rebel that was in my price point. It was on the upper end, around $39,000, so it was right at that sweet spot. So of course I had to test drive it. Fell in love with the interior. It was amazing until it wasn't. We were test driving these on a rather cooler day, and then we realized, well, maybe we should try the air conditioning in the Rebel. the Jeep already had it on, so it wasn't a question on whether it was working or not. We turned on the air conditioning. It didn't work. And then things just got worse from there. We started noticing little things about it that just weren't quite there for the mileage it had. And then the icing on top of the cake was we parked it after we were done test driving it, and we started smelling something. It had a coolant leak. And the dealership guy who we're dealing with, he went, you know, it is what it is. It's a used vehicle. And I was like, oh, so that's how it's gonna be. So I was so excited for this, and of course Ram Rebels they're hard to find at a good price, so I decided to walk away from this one. So that, sadly, the Ram Rebel was off the list because it just had too many problems for the price that it was at. So we went looking on another day, and I found a Forester Wilderness. This one just hit the lot, and it was brand spanking new, around $39,000 at the top of my price point that I was looking at. But I was super excited about it because it's a Wilderness, it's a Subaru. Maybe a Forester could be for me. And we got there, and it just seemed really cool until I drove it. And if you're coming from an Outback Wilderness into a Forester Wilderness, you'll know what I'm talking about. Now, the Forester Wilderness does not come with a turbo engine. So when we went to pull on the highway, I expected a little bit more punch. It was probably the slowest vehicle of a Subaru I've ever driven. And our 15 wasn't fast, but this one just felt so slow. It just didn't have the power, and then I didn't like the layout of the controls as much as I liked them in my Outback Wilderness. So at this price point, I was like, I just don't want to spend that kind of money for something that I truly didn't love, even though it was a Subaru. So sadly, the Subaru Forester was off the list. So right now, at the point of this video, we have the Gladiator that's still on the list, but nothing else has made our short list. These final two both made the short list. So the first one we're going to talk about is the Ford Ranger. I know, we went back to Ford. Well, with the employee pricing discounts and them having some leftover 24s while the 25s were coming out, we decided we were going to test drive a Ford Ranger XLT in azure blue, or azure gray, I'm not sure. It's blue. It's that nice grayish blue color they have. Well, I really loved the interior of that vehicle. It had all the things I could possibly want, except for it was a little bit overpriced, but I knew that there were some other ones around us at different dealerships. So when I test drove it, it had all the power I wanted. It drove exactly the way I wanted it. I was actually excited about this vehicle. Plus, it tows over 7,500 pounds, and the payload is amazing. Seems like it would fit the bill for something that we want to do truck-like things when we don't want to use Grizzly. Well, of course, that one made the short list, but I wasn't sold on the packages they had because it was a little too fancy and a little bit too much money. So if I decided I was going to go with the Ford, I was going to have to find a different one than the one we test drove. But that leads us to our final vehicle that we test drove that I also really, really liked and made the short list. And that is the 2025 Nissan Frontier. It has a lot of niceties for what it was. So it's orange, and it's a long bed, and it drives like a dream. The interior, the complaints I had before on the first generation of these were fixed on this one. The seats were comfortable, everything drove well, it handled like a truck, and it tows, I can't remember the towing numbers, but it tows really, really well. And it also has good payload. And plus, since this wasn't going to be our major off-roader, having a long bed again for house projects seemed like a great idea. So that one made the short list as well. Decision on the three vehicles that we came to was a used Gladiator Willys, and that one was awesome. We have the Ford Ranger in the XLT, and we also have the Nissan Frontier. Those are the top three that we decided that we were going to go wheeling and dealing on, and I can honestly say that they were worth the price point that they were asking. Now, the Jeep is the most expensive out of the bunch. I did find a Ford Ranger XL and an XLT at another dealership that we started wheeling and dealing on, and also we found a even cheaper long bed over in Denver for the Nissan. So we decided we start wheeling and dealing on all three of them, and we did bring one of those three home with us, and that vehicle will be revealed in our next video. So if you're looking for a vehicle under $40,000, because Subaru Outback Wildernesses are just kind of out of your price range, just know that there are some really great mid-sized trucks and other SUVs that are out there. I think that if you're going to go wilderness, you should be looking at some of these mid-sized trucks. I was pleasantly surprised with the Ranger and the Nissan overall. The comfort, the drivability, and the fuel economy that they do offer is very similar to the wilderness in the real world numbers. But we will reveal which one we got, either the Gladiator, the Ford, or the Nissan in our next video. But until next time, we'll see you guys later. Bye for now.